I'm Leo, I'm 28, and my own father publicly humiliated me on Thanksgiving in front of everyone we knew, calling me a failure and a servant. Before I tell you how that single moment led to a divorce, a criminal investigation, and me finally taking back my life, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It helps to know I'm not alone in this. It all started with the smell of roasted turkey and the low hum of forced family cheer. Thanksgiving. For most people, it's a time of warmth and gratitude. For me, it had always been a performance, a role I was expected to play without complaint. The dutiful son, the quiet one, the helper. This year was no different. While my brother, Ethan, the golden child, regaled my parents with stories of his booming tech startup, and my sister, Chloe, scrolled through her phone, occasionally laughing at something on her screen, I was on my feet. I refilled wine glasses, cleared empty appetizer plates, and began the familiar ritual of setting the long dining table. The fine china, only used twice a year, felt heavy in my hands. Each plate I set down was a quiet reminder of my place. I wasn't part of the conversation. I was the stagehand making sure the show went on. I didn't mind the work, not really. What I minded was the invisibility, the complete and utter lack of acknowledgement. That's when I saw it. My dad, Richard, was standing by the doorway, his phone pointed right at me. A slow, smug smile spread across his face. I paused, the gravy boat in my hand. Dad? What are you doing? He just chuckled. Just capturing a moment, son. Keep going. You're a natural at this. There was an edge to his voice I knew all too well. It was the same tone he used when he'd compare my steady but boring software engineering salary to Ethan's supposed entrepreneurial genius. The same tone he used when I'd try to share a success from work and he'd cut me off to ask if I'd remembered to get the oil changed in his car. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach, but I tried to ignore it. I finished setting the table, placing the last fork beside the last napkin. Just then, Chloe's phone buzzed, then Ethan's. They both looked down, and a moment later, they burst out laughing. Not a quiet chuckle, but a loud, mocking laugh that filled the entire room. "Oh my God, Dad, that's brutal," Chloe snickered, showing her screen to Ethan. Ethan wheezed, wiping a tear from his eye. The caption is perfect. Absolutely perfect. My own phone buzzed in my pocket. My hand was trembling as I pulled it out. It was a notification from Facebook. My dad had tagged me in a video. The video was of me just moments ago, meticulously setting the table. But it was the caption that made the air leave my lungs. "Look at this failure. His lot in life is to be a servant. Some things never change." The world went silent. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. I looked up from my phone. My father was still standing there, that same smirk on his face, watching me, waiting for my reaction. My siblings were still laughing. And my mother, Helen, she was just staring down at her plate, saying nothing. Her silence was the loudest sound in the room. Something inside me, something that had been worn down and eroded over 28 years of quiet dismissals and casual cruelty, finally snapped. I placed the gravy boat on the table with a loud clink. I didn't shout. I didn't make a scene. I just turned, walked to the front hall, grabbed my coat, and opened the door. "Where are you going?" my father called out, his voice laced with annoyance, not concern. "Dinner's almost ready." I didn't look back. "I'm not hungry," I said, and walked out into the cold November air, shutting the door on their laughter. The next day, as I was trying to piece myself back together, a text message from Ethan lit up my phone. "Why can't I withdraw $2,000 from your account?" And that's when I knew the storm was just getting started. The drive to my Aunt Carol's house was a blur of streetlights and silent tears. Carol was my mom's younger sister, and she was the one person in my family who had always seen me. Really seen me. When I showed up on her doorstep, shivering and speechless, she just pulled me into a hug, no questions asked. As I sat on her couch, a warm mug of tea in my hands, the past came flooding back in disjointed, painful flashes. It wasn't just about the video. The video was just the final, public confirmation of a truth I had lived with my entire life. In my family, there were two sons, but only one mattered. Ethan was the star. He was charismatic, loud, and ambitious. He was the one who got the new car for his 16th birthday, the one whose C-grade report cards were celebrated as showing potential, the one who could do no wrong. I was the shadow, quiet, studious, and reliable. My straight A's were met with a simple, "That's nice, Leo." My needs were secondary, my achievements footnotes. I remembered when I was 22, fresh out of college with my first real job. I'd been saving diligently for a down payment on a small condo. Ethan, meanwhile, was on his third failed startup, funded by a mysterious source of money I was too naive to question at the time. He drove a flashy sports car, while I was still driving my 10-year-old sedan. One afternoon, I got a call. It was Ethan. "Hey, little bro, I'm in a bit of a jam. The insurance on my car is due. It's like $1,000. Can you spot me? I'm about to land a huge investor. I'll pay you back double." I knew I shouldn't. My savings account was my lifeline, my escape plan. But the pressure was immense. When I hesitated, he put my dad on the phone. "Leo, don't be selfish," Richard's voice boomed. "Your brother is on the verge of something big. It's a family investment. You help him out now, we all benefit later. Don't you want to be part of the family's success?" So I did it. I transferred the money. A week later, Ethan crashed the car street racing. The insurance company refused to pay out. The $1,000 I'd given him vanished, along with any chance of getting it back. When I tried to bring it up, my father told me to stop being petty. "It's just money, Leo. Your brother is going through a lot. Have some compassion." But it was my money. It was my hard work. That was the moment I understood. To them, my resources, my time, my money, my energy were not my own. They were a family utility, to be used and disposed of for Ethan's benefit. That was the day the seed of a plan was planted. I couldn't change them, but I could protect myself. I couldn't win their love or respect, but I could win my freedom. Sitting there on Aunt Carol's couch, the warmth of the mug seeping into my cold hands, I remembered the cold resolve I felt that day. And I knew that the decision I had made months ago, the one that led to Ethan's angry text message, was the single smartest thing I had ever done. The foundation for my escape had already been built. They just hadn't realized it yet. Aunt Carol sat down across from me, her expression a mixture of anger and concern. "Leo, what's this about an account? What did Ethan mean?" I took a deep breath. "Do you remember a few years ago when Mom and Dad suggested I open a joint savings account with them?" She nodded, her lips tightening. "I remember. Helen told me it was for family emergencies. I told her it was a terrible idea. Well, I was young and stupid enough to fall for it," I admitted, shame washing over me. "The deal was I'd put a portion of my salary in there every month. They said it was a way for us to build a family safety net. But I was the only one ever putting money in. It became my emergency fund, my vacation fund, my everything fund. And they had full access to it. I explained how, over the years, small amounts would disappear. $100 here for groceries, $200 there for a utility bill. Then the withdrawals got bigger. It was always for Ethan. Money for his business expenses, money for a new suit for a meeting, money to cover his rent. Every time I questioned it, I was accused of being greedy and unsupportive. About a year ago, I continued, my voice low. After the car insurance incident, I started to wake up. I realized this wasn't a safety net. It was a slush fund. My slush fund. So I made a plan. I told her how I'd opened a new high-yield savings account at a completely different, online-only bank. An account no one knew about. It became my secret. Every month, I'd continue to deposit my usual amount into the joint account, letting them think everything was normal. But then, a few days later, I would transfer the bulk of it, plus extra savings from my paycheck, into my secret account. It was a slow, painstaking process. I had to be careful not to raise any red flags. For 12 months, I lived like a monk, saving every penny I could, funneling it away into my digital fortress. I watched the number in my secret account climb, a warm glow of hope in the cold reality of my family life. 5,000, 10,000. 15. The day before Thanksgiving, I said, looking Carol in the eye. I hit my goal. I had just over $21,000 saved. And I knew it was time. I logged into the joint account. There was about $2,500 left in it. I initiated a transfer for the entire amount to my new account, and then I submitted the paperwork online to permanently close the joint account. I wanted to cut the cord completely. A slow smile spread across Aunt Carol's face. Leo, that's brilliant. I thought so too, I said, a grim smile touching my own lips. Apparently, Ethan had plans for that last $2,500. He must have tried to make his $2,000 withdrawal this morning and found the account empty and closed. My phone buzzed again. It was Ethan. Then another from Chloe. Then one from my father. I didn't have to look. I knew what they would say. But for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt a sliver of power. The walls of their prison were starting to crack. The rest of the day was a relentless digital assault. My phone became a weapon aimed directly at me. I sat on Aunt Carol's guest bed, watching the notifications pile up, each one a fresh wave of venom. First, Ethan, his confusion turning to pure rage. Where is the money, Leo? Did you seriously take everything out? Are you kidding me? I needed that. You're so unbelievably selfish. After everything Mom and Dad do for you. I see how it is. You've always been jealous of me. This is just you being petty and bitter. Then came Chloe. Her messages were somehow worse, laced with a casual, sneering cruelty and a flurry of laughing, crying emojis. LMAO, Dad was right, you really are a failure. Can't even handle being part of a family. Ethan told me what you did. So pathetic. You're really gonna throw a tantrum over a joke? Grow up. Have fun being all alone with your precious money. Don't come crying to us when you have no one left. I could picture them perfectly. Sitting in the living room I had just fled, phones in hand, tag-teaming me, feeding off each other's self-righteous anger. They weren't hurt. They were inconvenienced. My actions had disrupted their comfortable, one-sided ecosystem, and they were furious. The heaviest blow, however, came from my father. It was a single, curt message. You've always been dramatic. Grow up. That was it. No questions. No concern. No hint of regret for what he'd done. Just a cold, dismissive command. It was a denial of my pain, a complete invalidation of my feelings. He had publicly branded me a failure, and now he was scolding me for reacting. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to type back a furious point-by-point rebuttal of every lie, every injustice, every single moment of disrespect I had endured for years. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, my mind racing with all the things I had never been brave enough to say. But then I looked at their messages again. I saw them not as family, but as bullies. And what's the one thing you're never supposed to do with bullies? You don't engage. You don't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. So I didn't. With a steady hand, I blocked Ethan's number, then Chloe's. Then, with a deep, shuddering breath, I blocked my father's. The stream of hateful messages stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, but it was a clean, peaceful silence. It was the sound of a door slamming shut. My mother hadn't messaged me, not a single word. I didn't know if that was better or worse. Her silence had always been a form of consent to their abuse, and it was no different now. I left her number unblocked, a tiny, foolish part of me holding out hope. At that point, I still didn't know that her silence was hiding a much bigger, darker secret. I just knew that I had drawn a line in the sand, and I had a feeling they were about to cross it in the most destructive way imaginable. For 2 days, there was nothing. The silence was unnerving. I stayed with Aunt Carol and her husband, my Uncle Ben, trying to pretend life was normal. I worked remotely from their spare room, losing myself in lines of code, anything to stop my mind from replaying that horrible Thanksgiving scene. I was starting to think, foolishly, that maybe they had gotten the message. Maybe my silence had been enough. Then, on Saturday night, my phone lit up. It was a picture message from an unknown number. My heart pounded as I opened it. The image was of my bedroom at my parents' house. or what was left of it. The phone almost slipped from my hand. My breath hitched. It wasn't just a mess. It was desecration. My books, my beloved collection of sci-fi paperbacks, had been torn from their shelves, their spines broken, pages ripped and scattered across the floor. The intricate model ship of the USS Constitution, the one I had spent an entire year painstakingly building, was a splintered wreck in the middle of the room. A dark, ugly smear of what looked like ketchup was smeared across the glass of my framed college diploma on the wall. They hadn't just made a mess. They had tried to erase me. They had targeted the things I loved, the things that represented me, and destroyed them with a vicious personal hatred. Beneath the photo was a caption, "Cleaning day. Should have taken your crap with you." A moment later, another text came through from the same number. It was a short video, shaky and filled with cruel laughter. It was Chloe's voice. "Oops. Guess your stuff got in the way, Leo. Maybe you should have thought about that before you stole from the family." Ethan was in the background, kicking over my desk chair. Bile rose in my throat. This wasn't about money anymore. This was punishment. This was them showing me, in the most brutal way possible, that I had no right to defy them. That anything I owned, anything I cared about, could be taken from me at their whim. I was showing the pictures to Aunt Carol and Uncle Ben, my hands shaking with rage, when my cousin David, their son, burst through the door. David was a good kid, a few years younger than me, and he'd always been on my side. "Leo, I came as fast as I could," he said, out of breath. He'd driven over to my parents' house after I'd forwarded him the texts, hoping to salvage something. "It's bad, but I got this." He held up my laptop bag. My heart leaped. "I told them I needed to get a textbook I left in your room," David explained. "They were laughing, bragging about what they did. I managed to grab your laptop, your passport, and that folder of important documents I saw on your desk. I stuffed them in my backpack. It's not much, but it's something. It was everything. My work, my identity, my future. They had tried to shatter my past, but David had just saved my future." As relief washed over me, a new, cold anger took its place. They hadn't just crossed a line. They had committed a crime, and I was going to make sure they paid for it. This was no longer just a family dispute. The next morning, my phone rang. The caller ID was blocked, but I had a sinking feeling I knew who it was. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a message popped up. It was from my mother. "Leo, honey, it's me. Please pick up. I just saw your room. I need to talk to you." Her voice was thick with what sounded like tears. Against my better judgment, I called her back. "Mom." "Oh, Leo," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I went out for groceries, and when I came back, it was like this. I swear I didn't know they were going to do that. Ethan and Chloe, they're so angry about the money." I listened, my knuckles white as I gripped my phone. Her words were a torrent of excuses and deflections. It was always about the money. It was always about Ethan and Chloe's anger. It was never about the initial act of cruelty from my father. It was never about my pain. "So you're sorry about the room?" I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "But you're not sorry about what Dad did? About the video? About the fact that you all sat there and laughed at me?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Richard, he didn't mean it like that, Leo. You know how he is. He has a harsh sense of humor. You took it the wrong way." And there it was, the final betrayal. She wasn't on my side. She was a peacekeeper. Her goal wasn't justice. It was a return to the status quo, even if the status quo was toxic and destroying one of her children. My pain was an inconvenience to her peace. "I have to go, Mom," I said, my voice cold. "Wait, Leo, don't hang up. We can fix this. If you would just apologize for taking the money." I ended the call. My heart felt like a block of ice in my chest. That last shred of hope I had for her, that she would finally stand up for me, disintegrated into dust. Later that day, Uncle Ben sat me down at his kitchen table. He was a quiet, no-nonsense man, an accountant who saw the world in black and white, assets and liabilities. "Leo," he said, his voice grim, This has gone too far. Vandalism is one thing, but there's something else you need to know. Something I probably should have told you a long time ago." He leaned forward, his eyes serious. "About 2 years ago, your father came to me. He said you were in some kind of financial trouble, a bad investment or something. He needed to borrow $6,000 to bail you out. He swore me to secrecy, said you were too proud to ask for help yourself." My blood ran cold. "What? I never made a bad investment. I never needed bailing out." "I know that now," Ben said, his jaw tight with anger. "I gave him the money. He promised to pay it back in 6 months. I never saw a dime. When I asked him about it, he told me your situation was worse than he thought. He used your name, Leo. He used your reputation to borrow money from me. And if he did it to me, who knows who else he's done it to." The room started to spin. The trashed bedroom was a physical manifestation of their hate. But this was something else entirely. This was a deeper, more insidious violation. My father hadn't just insulted me. He had been using my name, my identity, as a tool for his own schemes. And the worst part was, I had a terrifying feeling this was still just the beginning. The conversation with Uncle Ben lit a fire under me. The pieces were starting to click into place, forming a picture that was far uglier than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about family dysfunction anymore. This was fraud. A few days later, a letter arrived at Aunt Carol's house, forwarded from my parents' address. The return address was from my father. My first instinct was to tear it up, but curiosity, and a growing sense of dread, made me open it. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an explanation. It was a demand. "Leo, I received a notice from Capital One. You need to handle it. When you were 21, I opened a credit card in your name to help you build your credit score. I've been managing it for you. There's a small balance on it that needs to be paid. Don't be irresponsible." Dad, my hands started to shake. I had no memory of this. I managed my own finances meticulously. I had one credit card with a 0 balance and an excellent credit score I had built myself. He was lying. To build my credit score? I muttered to the empty room. He opened a card in my name and didn't tell me? A cold suspicion crept into my mind. If he did it once, what was to stop him from doing it again? That night, I did something I should have done years ago. I went online to the official government site and requested my free annual credit reports from all 3 major bureaus: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. The next morning, the emails arrived. I opened the first report, my heart hammering against my ribs. I scrolled past my student loans, my car loan, my one familiar credit card. And then I saw them. There were 2 of them. The first was a Capital One card, just like my father's letter said. Opened 7 years ago. It had a credit limit of $5,000. And it wasn't a small balance. It was maxed out. A balance of $4,987. And a history of late payments. My excellent credit score had a string of 30-day and 60-day late marks I never knew existed. The second one was from Chase. Opened 3 years ago. It had a balance of $2,400. This one was also in my name. I felt like I was going to be sick. This was identity theft. Plain and simple. And it was committed by my own father. The lies piled on top of each other. The $6,000 he'd borrowed from Uncle Ben for me. The credit cards he'd opened for me. He hadn't just stolen my money. He had stolen my name. He had put my financial future at risk, saddling me with debt and damaging my credit, all while calling me a failure. The anger was so intense it was dizzying. I thought about the condo I had wanted to buy. I thought about the financial security I had worked so hard to build. He had been sabotaging me from the shadows the entire time. I picked up my phone. I didn't call him. I didn't call my mother. I called the fraud departments at Capital One and Chase. I spoke with a calm, steady voice I didn't recognize as my own. "Hello," I said. "My name is Leo Miller, and I need to report several fraudulent accounts that have been opened in my name." The switch had been flipped. I was no longer a victim. I was a man gathering evidence. The storm was no longer happening to me. I was about to become the storm. A week after I reported the fraud, There was a knock on Aunt Carol's door. It was my mother. She looked smaller than I remembered, her face pale and drawn. She was holding a cardboard box. "Leo," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. We sat in the living room in an awkward silence. She pushed the box across the coffee table towards me. "I saved what I could from your room," she said. "Some of your photos, your yearbooks. The things I knew they wouldn't think to destroy." I looked inside. It was a collection of small, sentimental things. A photo of me and my childhood dog. My high school honor roll certificate. It was a peace offering, but it felt like too little, too late. "Thank you," I said, my voice neutral. She wrung her hands, her eyes darting around the room, unable to meet mine. Finally, she took a deep, shaky breath. "I'm leaving your father, Leo." The words hung in the air between us. Of all the things I expected her to say, that wasn't one of them. "I've been a coward," she continued, her voice cracking. "For years. I've watched him favor Ethan. I've watched him dismiss you. I told myself it was just his way, that he loved you both equally but just had a different way of showing it. But I was lying to myself." She finally looked at me, and her eyes were filled with a profound, soul-deep shame. "That day at Thanksgiving when he posted that video, and then when I saw what they did to your room, it was like a switch flipped. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was cruelty. And my silence made me a part of it." She paused, gathering herself. "After you left, things got worse. The fighting, the drinking. Richard has been a mess. And he's been careless. I found things, Leo. Bank statements. Loan documents. This was it. The other shoe was about to drop. Ben wasn't the only one," she said, confirming my worst fears. "Richard borrowed $4,000 from David's other uncle, your cousin's father. He borrowed $3,500 from my great-aunt. And every single time he used your name. He told them you were in trouble and that you were too ashamed to ask yourself. He leveraged their love for you to get what he wanted." A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips. "And what did he want, Mom? What was all this money for? Was he gambling?" My mother shook her head, a strange look on her face. "No, it wasn't for him. Not directly. He was funneling it all to Ethan. For his company." The air crackled. The pieces slammed into place with dizzying force. The failed startups. The flashy car. The endless need for cash. It wasn't just my savings account they were raiding. It was my name, my credit, my entire identity that was being used to prop up my brother's facade of success. This was the first major twist, the first glimpse into the rot at the core of my family. And with my mother's confession, I now had an unexpected and crucial ally. My mother's visit changed everything. It transformed my personal battle into a calculated campaign. I was no longer just defending myself. I was preparing to dismantle the entire corrupt system my father had built. With her testimony, I now had a roadmap of the fraud. That night, I sat down with Uncle Ben and Aunt Carol. My mother had left a small stack of documents she had photocopied from my father's desk. We spread them out on the dining room table under the bright overhead light. Felt like a war room. There were copies of loan agreements Richard had drafted himself, with my forged signature at the bottom. There were bank statements showing lump sum transfers from my father's account directly to an account titled Ethan Miller Innovations, LLC. "This is airtight, Leo," Uncle Ben said, his accountant's mind seeing the clear, illegal trail. "This isn't just a family squabble. This is bank fraud, wire fraud, and identity theft." The next day, I took a personal day off work. My first call was to a lawyer specializing in financial crimes. I explained the situation calmly and methodically, referencing the documents and the timeline. The lawyer was quiet for a moment after I finished. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice serious, "you have a very strong case, not just for civil action to recover the money, but for criminal charges. What your father and potentially your brother have done is a felony." The word felony hung in the air. This was real. This had life-altering consequences for them. A part of me, The small, beaten-down boy who still just wanted his dad's approval. Flinched. But the man I was becoming, the man who had his room and his identity violated, knew this was the only way. For the rest of the day, I became an archivist of my own life's injustices. I printed every hateful text message from Ethan and Chloe. I printed the photos of my destroyed bedroom. I created a detailed spreadsheet, tracing every dollar my mother had pointed me to, from the relatives' loans to the transfers to Ethan's company. I compiled the credit reports, the fraud alerts, the case numbers from the credit card companies. I placed everything into a single, thick manila folder. On the front, I wrote a single word, proof. I was ready. The anger had cooled, replaced by a steely, focused resolve. I wasn't going to scream or cry. I was going to present the facts. I was going to let their own actions, their own greed and cruelty, be their undoing. I was going to arrange one final family meeting, but this time it would be on my terms. This time I would be the one in control. I called my father. He picked up on the first ring, his voice wary. "Leo, I want to have a family meeting," I said, my voice even and calm. "You, me, Mom, Ethan, and Chloe. Sunday afternoon. At your house." There was a pause. I could hear the gears turning in his head. He probably thought I was finally caving, coming back to beg for forgiveness, ready to apologize for the chaos I had caused by protecting my own money. "Fine," he finally said. "Be here at 2. When I walked into that house on Sunday, the thick manila folder under my arm, the atmosphere was thick with tension. My father sat in his usual armchair, the king on his throne. Ethan and Chloe were on the sofa, looking smug and defiant. My mother stood nervously by the fireplace, a silent observer. She had agreed to be there as a witness. They were expecting an apology. I was there to deliver a reckoning. I didn't sit down. I walked to the center of the room and placed the folder on the coffee table with a soft thud. "I'm glad we could all get together," I began, my voice clear and steady, "because we need to talk about some financial discrepancies." Ethan scoffed. "Oh, here we go. Leo's going to lecture us about his precious $2,000. "No," I said, looking directly at him. "We're going to talk about a lot more than that." I opened the folder. The first thing I pulled out was a copy of the Capital One credit card statement, the one with the nearly $5,000 balance. I placed it on the table in front of my father. "Dad, you said you opened this card to help build my credit. Can you explain why it has a history of late payments and a maxed-out balance?" Richard's face flushed. "Those are business expenses, a temporary cash flow issue. I was going to pay it off." "With what money?" I asked calmly. "The money you borrowed from Uncle Ben?" I laid down the next document, a copy of the personal loan agreement he'd signed with Ben. His color deepened. "Ben had no right to discuss that with you. That was a private matter." "It stopped being a private matter when you used my name and my reputation to secure it," I countered. "Just like it wasn't a private matter when you borrowed $4,000 from Uncle Robert, or $3,500 from Great Aunt Susan." One by one, I laid out the evidence of the loans. Chloe and Ethan were starting to look uneasy. This was more than they had bargained for. "This is insane," Chloe muttered. "Dad was just trying to manage the family's finances." "Is that what you call it?" I said, turning my gaze to her. "What about this?" I tossed the photos of my destroyed bedroom onto the pile. Chloe flinched. Ethan looked away. "Is this also part of managing the family's finances? Destroying my property because I cut off your illegal access to my bank account?" The smugness was gone from their faces, replaced by a sullen anger. My father stood up, his face a mask of fury. "That's enough, Leo. You've made your point. You're upset. We get it. Now stop this nonsense." "I'm just getting started," I said, my voice dropping. I looked at the pile of debt, the proof of lies and manipulation. The final piece of the puzzle was about to be put into place. "I have one last question for you, Dad. All this money, the credit card debt, the loans from family, it adds up to over $20,000. That's a lot of money to just disappear. So where did it go? Did you have a gambling problem I didn't know about?" Bad investments. I let the question hang in the air, a final, damning silence before the explosion. My father just stared at me, his jaw working but no words coming out. He was caught, trapped by the web of his own lies. He had no answer, but I did. I reached back into the folder and pulled out the last set of documents. They were the bank statements my mother had copied. I smoothed them out on the coffee table right on top of everything else. "Don't worry, I know where it went," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I tapped the top page with my finger. "It went here." Ethan leaned forward, his face pale, as he recognized the account number. It was his. Ethan Miller Innovations, LLC. The statements showed a clear, undeniable pattern. Within days of my father receiving a loan from a relative or running up a charge on one of my fraudulent cards, an identical or similar amount would be transferred directly into Ethan's business account. "It wasn't for family emergencies, was it?" I said, my eyes locked on my father, but my words were for everyone in the room. "It wasn't a gambling debt. It was a business investment. You weren't just stealing my money and my name to stay afloat. You were stealing it to fund his booming startup." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of a universe collapsing. I turned to my brother. "Your new office space, Ethan? The catered lunches you bragged about on Instagram? The salary you were paying yourself while your company never made a single dollar of profit? This is where it came from. Came from me. From my name. From the trust our family had in me. Your success was a lie, built on my stolen identity." Ethan's face, which had been pale, now turned a blotchy, sickly red. He looked like he was going to be sick. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Chloe stared at the papers, then at Ethan, then at me, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrified understanding. The brother she worshipped, the success story she bragged about to her friends, was a fraud. But it was my father's reaction that was the most telling. The anger, the bluster, the arrogance. It all drained away, leaving behind a hollow, defeated old man. He sank back into his armchair, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. He had sacrificed one son for the other, and in the end he had lost them both. My mother, who had been standing silent this whole time, finally moved. She walked over to the coffee table, looked down at the mountain of evidence, and then looked at my father with an expression of pure, cold finality. "It's over, Richard," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I had done it. I had laid the truth bare. There were no more shadows to hide in, no more lies to prop them up. There was only the ugly, undeniable proof of their betrayal." I looked at their shattered faces, and I didn't feel anger or even satisfaction. I just felt a profound sense of release. The weight I had been carrying my entire life had finally been lifted. I was free. I calmly gathered my documents, placing them back in the folder. I didn't need them anymore. The damage was done. I turned and walked toward the door without another word. My family was broken, but I was finally whole. CTA. This was the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for sticking with me to this point. You are amazing. Please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below, just so I know you've been with me on this journey. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone else. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of my journey. Leaving that house felt like breaking the surface of the water after being held under for too long. I took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air, and it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. I didn't look back. The days that followed were quiet. I had expected explosions, angry phone calls, something, but there was nothing. It was an unnerving silence, the kind that follows a massive detonation, when the dust is still settling. The first piece of news came from my mother about a week later. She called me from a new number. "I did it, Leo," she said, her voice strained but firm. "I filed for divorce. The papers were served to your father this morning." The word divorce didn't shock me as much as I thought it would. Felt inevitable, a natural consequence. "He didn't take it well," she continued. "He's blaming you, of course. saying you poisoned me against him. It wasn't me, Mom, I said gently. It was his own actions. I know, she replied. It took me a long time to see it, but I know now. The second piece of the fallout was my own doing. The day after the confrontation, I had mailed a formal, registered letter to the CEO of my father's company, Mr. Harrison. It was a concise, professionally written summary of the identity theft and financial fraud, complete with copies of the fraudulent credit card statements and the police report number I had filed. I stated factually that my father, Richard Miller, a senior manager at their firm, had used my identity to secure fraudulent lines of credit. I simply presented the information, making no demands, and stated that I had reported these crimes to the relevant authorities. I didn't know what, if anything, would come of it, but I felt it was my duty to report it. A man who could so easily defraud his own son and his extended family could surely do the same to his employer. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing from that front either. I focused on my own life. I found a small, one-bedroom apartment for rent in a quiet neighborhood across town. I used a portion of my savings for the security deposit and first month's rent. The feeling of signing that lease, of having a space that was entirely my own, was indescribable. It was a place where no one could enter without my permission, a place where my things would be safe. It was my sanctuary. The silence from my father, brother, and sister continued, and with each passing day, it felt less like a threat and more like a blessing. Just when I had started to believe I might never hear from them again, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Leo, it's Ethan. Can we please talk? It's important." My first instinct was to block the number. What could he possibly have to say? But a morbid curiosity won out. I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between my new apartment and their broken home. The man who walked into the coffee shop was not the brother I knew. The arrogant swagger was gone. His expensive clothes were rumpled, his face was gaunt, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He sat down across from me, avoiding my eyes. "Thanks for coming," he mumbled. "What do you want, Ethan?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. He finally looked up, and his eyes were filled with a desperate, pathetic plea. "I need you to help me. You have to call it off." "Call what off?" "The police report, the fraud claims, everything. You're destroying my life." He told me what had happened since that Sunday. His fiancée, Sophia, had broken off their engagement after my mother told her parents the truth about where Ethan's money had really come from. His investors, the friends and family he had lied to, were all demanding their money back. His company had completely imploded. "It's all gone, Leo," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Everything." I just looked at him. I felt nothing. No pity. No satisfaction. Just a vast, empty distance. "You built your life on lies and theft, Ethan," I said. "It was never real to begin with. You weren't destroying your life. You were living on a stolen one. Mine." He broke down then, a grown man crying in the middle of a crowded coffee shop. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "Okay? I'm sorry. I was so scared of failing. Dad always put so much pressure on me to be the successful one. And you were always so good at everything without even trying. I was jealous. I hated it. I told myself you owed it to me, that it was your family duty to support me. I was wrong. I was so wrong." This was the second twist, the one I never saw coming. Not the apology itself, but the raw, pathetic honesty of it. The golden child was admitting he was nothing but gilded plastic. "Please, Leo," he begged. "Talk to the lawyer. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." I took a sip of my coffee. "No, Ethan," I said, my voice calm and final. "There was no misunderstanding. You made your choices. Dad made his. Now you both have to live with them. I have to go. I have a life to build. A real one." I stood up and walked out, leaving him there with the ruins of his paper empire. I didn't look back. 6 months later, spring had arrived, and with it, a sense of renewal I had never thought possible. Life had moved on, and so had I. The legal storm had finally passed. My lawyer had been incredible. armed with my evidence and the cooperation of the defrauded relatives. He'd managed to clear my name completely. The fraudulent accounts were wiped from my credit report, and the credit bureaus placed a 7-year fraud alert on my file. My credit score was already rebounding. The consequences for my father and brother were severe. My father was fired from his job. Mr. Harrison, the CEO, had called me personally to thank me for bringing the matter to his attention. An internal audit had revealed my father had also been fudging his expense reports for years. The termination was quiet, disguised as an early retirement to avoid a bigger scandal. But the message was clear. He was disgraced, facing potential criminal charges. He agreed to a settlement orchestrated by our lawyers. He was forced to sell the family home, the one I had grown up in, to pay back every cent he had stolen from me, from Uncle Ben, and from the other relatives. Ethan, without my father's financial backing, was adrift. His startup was dead, and with his reputation in tatters, he was struggling to find a job. Chloe had moved in with a friend, distancing herself from the family drama her actions had helped create. I hadn't spoken to either of them since that day in the coffee shop. My life, in contrast, was blossoming. My savings, which had been the catalyst for this whole mess, had become the foundation for my new life. With the settlement money added to it, my bank account now held nearly $30,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. It was security. It was freedom. My new apartment was my sanctuary. It was small, but the afternoon sun streamed through the large living room window, which overlooked the river. I had filled it with new things that were mine alone. New books lined new shelves. A new, even more intricate model ship was taking shape on my new desk. I was excelling at work. Freed from the constant stress and drain of my family, my mind was clearer, my focus sharper. I received a promotion and a significant raise to my salary, further cementing my independence. I was building a life based on my own merits, my own hard work. Sometimes, in the quiet evenings, I would stand by my window and watch the boats on the river, and a sense of profound peace would wash over me. The ghosts of the past were finally fading. I had survived the storm, and I had emerged on the other side, not broken but stronger and finally truly on my own. One Saturday afternoon, my mother called. We had spoken a few times since the divorce was finalized. Our conversations were tentative, like two people learning a new language. The old language of denial and obligation was gone. We were trying to build something new, something based on honesty. "Hi, Leo," she said. Her voice sounded lighter than it had in years. "I was wondering if I could see your new apartment?" I hesitated for a moment. My apartment was my safe space. But I knew that if we were ever going to have a real relationship, I had to let her in just a little. "Okay, Mom," I said. "Come over around 2. When she arrived, she brought a small housewarming gift, a potted orchid. "I know you always liked them," she said softly. I took her on a small tour. She didn't say much, but I could see the relief in her eyes. She saw that I was okay. More than okay. I was thriving. We sat in the living room, sipping tea. "I got a part-time job," she announced, a hint of pride in her voice. "At the local library. It's not much, but it's mine." I smiled. "That's great, Mom." We talked for a while about her new life, her small apartment, her job. We didn't talk about Dad or Ethan or Chloe. It was an unspoken agreement. That was the past. We were focused on the present. As she was getting ready to leave, she paused at the door. "Leo," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "I know sorry will never be enough for all the years I stood by and did nothing. But I want you to know, I'm so proud of the man you've become. You're strong and you're good. You deserved so much better." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I deserved better too," she added quietly. It took me a long time to realize that. In that moment, I saw her not as the mother who had failed to protect me, but as another person who had been trapped in the same toxic system, just in a different way. We were both survivors. I nodded. "I know, Mom." After she left, I placed the orchid on the windowsill where it would get the most sun. It was a fragile thing, but beautiful. It felt like a symbol of our new relationship. It wouldn't be easy. It would take time and care and the right conditions to grow. But for the first time, it felt possible. I wasn't just healing myself. I was breaking a cycle that had poisoned my family for generations. And that was a legacy to be proud of. It's been over a year now since that Thanksgiving. Life is quiet, and I've come to realize that quiet is not the same as empty. It's peaceful. It's the sound of being in control of your own destiny. I sit here in my own apartment, a place bought with my own hard-earned money, and I look at the life I've built. It's not flashy. It's not the kind of success my father and brother were always chasing. But it's real. It's solid. It's mine. The journey was brutal. It forced me to confront the painful truth that the family I was born into would never be the family I needed. The love and validation I craved from them was a mirage in a desert, always just out of reach. And chasing it was killing me. I had to learn the hardest lesson of all. My value is not determined by their approval. My worth isn't something they can grant me or take away with a cruel Facebook post. It comes from within. It comes from my actions, my integrity, my ability to stand up for myself, even when my voice shakes. That video my dad posted, the one meant to humiliate me, ended up being a gift. It was the public execution of the old me, the quiet, compliant son who would do anything for a scrap of affection. It forced a new me to be born from the ashes, a man who understands that setting a boundary isn't an act of selfishness. It's an act of self-preservation. I don't know what the future holds for my father, brother, or sister. I hope, for their own sakes, that they find some kind of peace. But their journey is no longer mine to worry about. I have my own path now, one that leads forward, not back. My name is Leo, and I am not a failure. I am a survivor. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace? I'd be honored if you shared your own experiences in the comments below. And please don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories. Truly means the world to me.